All right, that was the story behind why Tom and I wear the number 18 uh, playing Junior B. And I'd like to welcome to the show Tom Gazzola. Tom, how you doing?
Nasher, I'm doing good, pal. It's TSN 1260 movie night, but I had to get in on the last episode of the season of Rinks
Ah,
around the league. So,
well, you
been with
didn't.
you all year. May as well do the conclusion.
Did you skip out of the rom-com episode night this week?
No, I wish. You know what? Going into that rom com, Jason Strudwick, by the way, wanted a rom com. I didn't. I don't care for rom coms.
Yeah, yeah.
Believe it or not, people think I'm a softie, this and that. I can't stand them. All my old girlfriends would make me watch them, and I'd just be like, "Oh my god, there better be a payoff for this." And they'd always ask, Hey, did you like that movie?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, it was fine." But
Like,
because
yeah,
Struddy picked this
sure.
rom com, yeah, I actually liked it. It was Notting Hill. It was okay. So today, my pick actually won on the vote, and we're gonna watch Death of Stalin, which I think is gonna be a great movie. It has some good reviews. So now you're up to speed on what we're doing at 1260.
Nice. And for viewers outside of the Edmonton area, I believe 1260 is doing a movie of the week where you guys do kind of like all of you watch at the same time, right?
Exactly. We pick a movie that's on Netflix. Jason Greger, the host of the afternoon show, has myself, Jason Strudwick, the former Oiler, and Connor Halley, who's our producer, all watch, and then we hashtag 1260 movie watch, and we get listeners to chime in and watch with us. So I usually crack a brewski, have a couple of snacks, and watch whatever movie. And I can't believe my pick actually won the vote today. So I'm proud. I'm excited. I'm nervous. And like a proud papa, I'm going to see this thing unfold in front of my eyes. So we'll see
Nice.
how it goes. But till then, I'm doing this, and
Nice.
we got lots to get to.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for taking some time during self-isolation to come on the show. So, apart from movies, tell viewers how's self-isolation going. What have you been doing? Keeping busy? You mentioned today got a pretty jam-packed schedule, but what's been going on since you've been just hanging out in your apartment?
Yeah, you know what? Like I have a good place to stay. I'm right downtown. My place is nice, a lot of room and everything. But when you're confined like this, it feels like you're twiddling your thumbs. But the funny thing is, Nasher, like today, Dave Tippett had an availability via teleconference like we're doing right now. And so it was kind of like chiming in on a press conference in the morning after a skate on a game day, but also at the same time, that weird element crept in because it was a teleconference, and you look at who's in the press conference, if you will, and you look at all the familiar names that are in there. Our colleagues, Jason Greger, Ryan Rashog, Connor Halley, our producer at TSN 1260, Jim Matheson, Reed Wilkins, everybody, the usuals, Gene, who was just on, but they're not there. So it's different in that regard, but
Right.
still at the same time, nice to have that familiarity again. And so that was a part of the afternoon. And then I also wound up on another podcast with our friend Mike Penhollow, who is also on Rinks in the League.
Yes, you was.
And him and I do a podcast called Best in the League. And for a hockey podcast, it really has nothing to do with hockey. It's all about the accoutrement of covering an NHL team or being a part of the media or traveling with an NHL team. And today's guest was actually former Bruin and current Hartford Wolfpack player, Matt Bolesky.
Oh,
And so, it's just funny how you think you have all day to do stuff, Nasher, and stuff creeps up on you. I had Luke Gazdick on yesterday on my podcast, Locked On Oilers, which you've been on many times, thankfully, and I certainly appreciate that. And it's funny how that one came to be because I haven't heard from Luke in probably 2 years. And when he was an Oiler, he's a good guy. You know him as well as I do,
yep,
Jeff.
absolutely.
And we would always chat. We'd talk on the plane. We'd talk in the locker room. We'd talk in hotels, or if we happened to catch each other crossing paths in a city when we were on the road. Anyway, so I did Locked On Oilers last week with Curtis Hamilton, another former Oiler. And he told the story about how he, on his first shift in the National Hockey League, hit a guy from behind. It happened to be Brian Lerg in one of the last games of the season in 2015. And John Scott came in. And so John Scott
Yeesh.
comes in because, it was a dirty hit, and Curtis got five for boarding, but did not get the game misconduct.
Oh
I think the
boy.
refs knew that it was his first National Hockey League game. And Curtis was like, I'm shaking in my boots because here comes John Scott. He's going to kill me. And thank God Luke Gazdic came in and saved my bacon. And I was like, this is a great story, because he ended up only playing that one game.
Oh
And
wow.
so I tweeted out from the Lockdown account a picture of that scrum, and I was like, hear Curtis Hamilton talk about his NHL debut, how he almost got thrown out of the game, and John Scott jumped in, and thank God Luke Gazdic rode into the rescue. And then John Scott saw it because I tagged all of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And John Scott wrote, Gazdic did what? And the next day, I get a text from Luke, and he's like, get me on your podcast right now. He's like, why is John puffing his chest like that? That's garbage. Get me on the podcast, Tom. I want to clear this up. And I was like, all right, man. So yesterday it ended up being Luke Gazdic. And then that was the first time I actually recorded video on my podcast in an interview. And I clipped a small portion of it, put it up on the Locked On account. And you know what, Nasher, for someone who hated editing and had to do it, I think I got good at it. I don't have the equipment that I used to when I was working with you for Oilers TV, and now I have the luxury of whenever I do TV, I have a great videographer in Dave Parker who works with Ryan Rashog, but when Rashog's not around, I fill in on the TV side, and all I have to do is say my lines into the mic and look good on camera, and the rest is taken care of down in Toronto. TSN, they cut the pieces together, put them up wherever they need to go, and distribute them. And my life's easier. So I'm still I'm trying to edit these little clips on an archaic system. I think I use QuickTime Player, and I'm like, boy, I really wish I had Adobe Premiere. And I was like, wow, I never thought I would say that in my life. And it's those little things that keep popping up, Jeff, that have kind of oddly enough made what are supposed to be pretty quiet days actually really busy. And so it's been good to have something like that keeping me going.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you were able to keep busy and occupy your time. And yeah, when you do tasks like that, they kind of eat in your time, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's dinner time.
Yeah.
So
at 5.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Just where we're at now.
Yeah. Well, you kind of did a wrap up. I remember Gaz. It was confusing because your and your brother's kind of nicknames was Gaz, and his nickname was Gaz. And I remember I don't believe he played in Rogers, but he was definitely in Rexall Place with the squad. And yeah, he was one of those quote unquote glue guys that was a fan favorite. And yeah, he was a good dude around the locker room.
Yep, absolutely, still is.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's good to hear he's still in good form. I want to go back to March 11th. That was the day, kind of infamous day. The Oilers were playing the Jets, I believe, in a 4-2 loss.
Yep.
But halfway through the game, that's when this COVID-19 stuff started to take notice, and the NBA came, I believe, halfway through the second period, or maybe during the first intermission, that they were suspending the season. And I was at home cooking dinner, and I had the game on just kind of by chance, and I saw the NBA make the announcement. Obviously, the intermission shows was nothing but talking about that, because obviously they kind of were anticipating NHL was going to follow suit. But for fans, you were following the game, but also following that story. Take me through that day and just what stood out at that day and how it unfolded.
Yeah, that was a long day. It was a surreal day, Nash. And the thing about that day was I was actually filling in for Rashog on the TV side in the morning. And it was the first time at Rogers Place that they had all of the COVID-19 media policies in place for both the home team and the away team. So the Oilers did all their press availabilities in the Hall of Fame room. There was everybody safe distancing from each other. And that was the second or third game that was actually in place. But it was the first game where the visiting team had its own press press conference room set up, and that was in the WHL visitors room.
Okay.
So we went from the Hall of Fame room all the way to the Jets room and then into the WHL visitors room and did the press conference in there with 3 or 4 players. And then Paul Maurice came in. And that's when it really started to, like, you know, set in that this was the new normal. And little did we know that that was going to be the one and only time that that actually occurred, because that night I go into our TSN 1260 studios and we're doing the pregame show. Everything's going normally. And in the last segment, in the last 5 minutes, we're hearing that the Utah Jazz Oklahoma City Thunder game is postponed.
Right.
And literally the officials are on the court, like on their headsets, talking to the war room that the NBA has and talking to the league, because it was reported, or it was thought, that one of the Jazz players, which ended up being Rudy Gobert, had COVID-19. So we're watching this all unfold, and I'm signaling my producer, Connor Halley, on the other side of the glass. I'm like, what's going on? He's talking in my ear. I'm trying to talk, and I'm like, all right, so keep an eye on this. Although this is the Oilers pregame show, an NBA game is suspended right now, and we're not sure what's happening, but it has something to do with the coronavirus. And literally, I took off my headset after I signed off and kicked it to the game, where my post-game show producer, Hernan Salas, because I have 2, comes in, and he goes, guys, you won't believe this. The game's suspended, and the NBA says it's going to have an announcement right away. And we're like, oh, man, what's going on? So we went into our talent tank, or the Jock Lounge, and we start watching the Oiler game. And literally like 10, 15 minutes into the game, they're like, the NBA is going to be suspending the league. And then I think 1 game or 2 games in the NBA actually finished that night. And then other one was suspended. And all we started talking about is like, okay, what does the NHL do? And it was almost like the game itself against the Jets, which was a very important game.
Yeah.
You know, the Jets were fighting to get into the playoff picture. The Oilers were looking to catch the Golden Knights because they're trying to reel them in. And it was like secondary. We didn't really care what was going on with the Oiler game, because everything that mattered was happening on Twitter, and it was in regard to the NBA game and the situation and how it was being handled by the NBA. And we knew that it had major ramifications for the NHL. And so by the end of the game, obviously we knew the outcome of what the NBA had decided, and it was going to suspend play indefinitely. And then, you know, we just started speculating what the NHL would do. And then finally, you know, Matthew Wannick came in, another one of our TSN 1260 personalities, does the afternoon show. We basically did an hour and a half. I think it was, we touched on the Oilers' loss to the Jets that night, but really it became the impact that this situation was going to have on the NHL. And you know what, even to a certain extent, we kind of deep dived a bit in how it's going to affect the world and the sporting world as a whole. And you know what, Nasher, here we are 3.5 weeks later, and you know, the news isn't getting better. So it was a surreal moment. You know, you only get a few of those shows and opportunities for something like that, where everybody, you know, you have everybody's attention, and you got to know the tone properly, and you got to know how to carry the conversation. And that was one of the shows that in my radio career, which is, you know, only 2 years old, really, where I felt like I nailed it, and we got the messaging right, and we had a good read of the tone, and we handled it properly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not saying like, hey, I nailed it, like I was a star that night. It was, no, we got it. We did what we were supposed to do to pass the right information, create a conversation. We were getting a ton of text, and you know, trying to support things with facts and all that. And that was one at the end where we're like, okay, I think we did the right thing. And actually we got the ratings back, and we did. We clobbered everybody that night in the city. And a lot of it has to do with the Oilers, obviously, because it had an immediacy to it with the Oilers. But I think, you know, we had people's attention, and hopefully we gave them a good hour and a half, because it felt like we accomplished something that night. But the way things have unfolded, Nasher, honestly, I don't think we could have foreseen, pardon me.
Yeah, and I mentioned to you because I think we had hockey 2 days after, and I remember mentioning to you that, yeah, like I think you hit it right on the head that you guys kind of struck the right tone for that moment in time because uh, even at that point, I think no one knew the gravity of the impact of COVID-19. I think Italy was just starting to, you know, uh, the gravity was starting to take hold of there. So in North America, it was definitely at that stage, not to say it was taken lightly, but I don't think everyone realized the seriousness. So I think, credit
Right.
to you guys at the TSM crew, Hernan, everybody on your crew. I think you guys hit the tone bang on, and I think I mentioned that to you when I saw you next. Is that you did a really good job articulating the gravity of the situation because it wasn't just an overreaction, which some fans were kind of screaming that this is an overreaction, but you guys struck a really good tone, the seriousness of it all. So props to you guys for doing such a good job on that show.
Appreciate it, man.
Um, totally switching gears. Uh, the like you said, third week into it, this has been pretty heavy stuff. But you've seen some pretty cool stuff on social. You see NHL players doing whatever it is, 10 hit toilet paper stick handle stuff or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
from your perspective, and maybe just in the immediate Edmonton area or media area, is there anything good come out of this? Is there anything that's kind of stuck out that you're like, you know what, if we keep kind of plugging along and supporting each other, doing these types of things, this is going to be a long haul, but we'll get through it?
Yeah, I think overall there's a sense of unity maybe and people on the same page. And there aren't a lot of times in the course of my lifetime that I can think of, especially as an adult, where you could actually say that. And listen, there's always going to be outliers and stuff. You see the idiots that have gone with their routines unchanged, and that's pretty high risk. And for the most part, it seems everyone is in lockstep with one another. They want to get past this, understand the severity of the situation. In the case of our world sports, it's a secondary or tertiary thing. It's not what really matters. It's an adult playground, quite frankly, and that's the reassuring thing I'm seeing is people generally understand and get the severity of this situation and want to work together to get through it. That's what I'm reassured by. In terms of, like, I don't mind the gas prices, I'll tell you that much. My tank's been full for dirt cheap, and I love it, but I haven't really been driving anywhere.
That's true.
The weather hasn't been great. Maybe that's helped to keep people indoors. And listen, I know it's like a high stress time, but it seems like when I go pick up groceries or whatever, or go to the bank and take care of tasks that are at essential outposts and all that within the city limits, seems like people are cordial and trying to take care of one another and be good to one another in a time of high stress, and that's a good thing. So I don't know how this will all play out, Jeff. I wish I did. But if gas prices when we come out of this at the other end are the same, I'll be quite happy. And if the price of a ticket and a hot dog and a beer to go to a sporting event also comes down, which may happen, considering the financial strain on basically everybody right now, for the fan out there of sport, I think will be a good thing as well.
Right. While you're well put. While you're at home, what you been binge watching? Tiger King?
I love Tiger King. It reminds me of when I lived in Oklahoma City.
Oh God,
I
yeah.
don't remember Joe Exotic. I'm sure I passed by many of his billboards along the highway. I never went to Wynwood, the GW Exotic Park. I never knew that was a thing. But there are so many things like that around Oklahoma City where you're like, as soon as you get there for the first
Yep.
time, you see stuff like that and you're like, oh my God, what is that? But I had traveled down there for a few years covering the Barons, and by the time I had to move there for the lockout, it was just like, it felt like home. So that kind of stuff didn't really catch my attention. And quite frankly, after the ending of Tiger King, I looked at the TV screen and I just was like, yeah, Oklahoma. That's all I could think of. Like, that's pretty much it. I don't know how many flashbacks I had watching that show, and how many, like, when he was going through the whole judicial process and was being sentenced. I'm like, oh, there's the courthouse. Oh yeah, there's that church.
Yeah,
That's where the
yeah,
arena was. Oh yeah, there's the where the memorial for the Oklahoma City bombing was, and it's just all these flashbacks. But so I watched Tiger King. I got to get on to Ozark season 3.
yes.
That's something that's on the priority list. And what else did I finish? There's been a lot of movies with these 1260 movie nights. So
Right.
the one thing I have gotten into, though, on I think it's History Channel, is like unidentified UFOs, like documentaries.
Okay.
And I don't know, like there's one on Netflix with Bob Lazar, and it's just captivating, and it's captured me, and I'm like, huh, wonder if these guys are onto something. And so that's kind of what's gotten my attention. Usually I like war films and stuff like
Right.
that, anything to do with battle and history, but the whole UFO craze is kind of seeping in. It's too much Joe Rogan. That's what it is. I'm listening to too much Joe Rogan, and I'm like, logically, this could be true. So it's kind of captivating, and it's certainly got my attention.
Nice. Yeah, well, you talk about OKC. I did one trip right before the Barons got relocated to Bakersfield and became the Condors. I went did a trip to OKC, and yeah, I know what you're talking about. When I was watching the show, I recognized some of the skyline. I remember going like in this abandoned bank. It was a beautiful building, but completely empty.
Yes.
It was really eerie, and
I've been in that building. It's like an old bank. Beautiful.
and there's a piano that plays by itself. It's one of those plays by itself, and it's kind of cool, but very creepy, weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of road, we'll get to a fan question before I let you go. Our good friend F. Neek on Insta, Fraser. You may have met him, yeah, during the Wayne Gretzky Hockey School, probably.
Yes. Good dude.
He asks, favorite road story, if you have one. I'm sure you probably can't tell me your favorite one, but tell me a favorite one.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today, actually. I'm like, what can I tell people? But one of my favorite ones was in New York City during the draft when it was actually held in New Jersey, but everything was centralized in New York City, and then everyone bussed to Jersey or whatever. And so we ended up having what was called the Scouts Dinner when we worked for Oilers TV. Some of the few times that we were actually brought in and made to feel like part of the family, if you will.
Yep.
We got to be a part of the Scouts Dinner at a really, really high-end downtown New York, Manhattan restaurant, and Daryl Cates was there and his family, and it's a big thank you for the hockey ops, and a lot of like alumni pop in, and that night Mark Messier was there. Nice. And I loved Mark Messier growing up, and had a chance to talk to him a few times, and that night too got to say hi. And former Oilers PR guy JJ Hebert was like, "You guys want to go out tonight?" And we're all like, "Yeah, we want to go fire it up in New York City." He goes, "Okay, well, Mess has a place that he owns, and it's like a 15-minute cab ride away, but he'll get us in. It's like a really hard place to get into." And I'm like, "I'm in. I'd like that." And so it ended up being myself, Jack Michaels, JJ Hebert, Todd Nelson, Mark Ciampa, Chris Westcott, and I think Nikki Sherman, who was Oilers TV video producer at the time.
Yep.
And we ended up hopping in these cabs, and JJ's like, "Okay, I've got the address." And he hops into the cab with me, and he's telling this cab driver, he's like, "Hey, take us to this address." And the guy's like, "Man, that place doesn't exist. I'm telling you, that's not an address. It doesn't exist." And he's like, "No, seriously, this is the place we were told by the owner." And he goes, "All right, I'll get you as close as I can." And we're in this cab, and you go from Manhattan where it's nice, and then you get to some not so nice areas, a little bit grungier parts of Manhattan. And I think it was on the east side, this spot. And so we pull up, and it's like a rundown neighborhood. And all of a sudden, you go from seeing like some sketchy people to like younger people dressed up nice. And you see a few shops lined up, but I didn't see a club anywhere. And the guy's like, "You sure this is the place? This is as close to the address as I can get you." And he's like, yeah, this should be it. This should be it. So we get out, there's 8 of us out of these 2 cabs, and we're all like looking around, and there's like a pizza shop and a convenience store and like a cash for less, money for less store, and then some row housing. And we're like, oh no, that's bad. And then there's this huge black dude with the toothpick in his mouth leaning on this gate. And he can see us like looking around like we're lost, and he goes, "You guys here from Mark's crew?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I'm Tim. Come with me." He's like 6'8", probably was a football player back in the day. This jacked, huge dude. And we're like, okay. And we all look at JJ, and JJ's like, "No, that's good. That's good. Tim's his friend. Tim's going to get us in." We're like, okay. And he takes us through this old rusty gate. And these are apartment buildings that were built in like the early 1900s, late 1800s. Really narrow back alley with like the swinging floodlight and like trash bins on the side overflowing and rats all over the place. And we walk for like 15 seconds between these buildings. And he's like, "All right, this is the place." And we're like, "What are you talking about? Like, are you going to murder all of us and steal our money right now?" And he slides open like a big steel door. And all of a sudden you can hear dum, 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 dum. And we're like, whoa. And then there's like a staircase to go up, and then another steel door. And then he like bangs 3 times. And then like you see in the movies, like the slider opens up for the eyes, and the person looks, sees Tim. He's like, "Okay." And then you just hear this big door slide open, and it's this massive nightclub. It was a speakeasy. And
Oh,
I
wow.
go in there, I'm like, oh my God. And everything was out of 1930 to 1940. All the furniture, the roof, the flooring, the bars, everything. And then the waiters and the waitresses and the bartenders were all dressed like it was the 30s. And Tim's like, "Welcome to blah, blah, blah spot. Mark is part owner of this place. It was opened up in 1932 by Lucky Luciano and his gang. Everything you see is original, except for the ceiling. The ceiling, the original tin ceiling, had to be replaced, but we replicated it exactly. All the artwork, that's Luciano's
Wow.
stuff. What can I get? What can I get you guys to drink?" And he calls someone over, and we all give our orders. And then he sees like this group. He's like, "All right, I'm going to give you guys a spot." Sees this group of people sitting in this like little section in these old vintage chairs, lounge chairs, and everything. And he's like, "I need all of you out of here now." Nobody even said a word. Didn't even complain. They saw Tim and they got out of there. And he cleared out everything. He's like, "This is yours. Whatever you need. This is so and so. She'll take care of you. Have fun. Mark sent you. You're in good hands here."
Wow.
And it was amazing. Yeah, and all the drinks came in either teacups if you got a spirit, or if you got a beer, it came in a coffee mug, because that's how they did it back in Prohibition. And then I remember going to the bathroom and seeing a piano beside the entrance to the bathroom. And I'm like, "Why is that there?" And then above it was like a handle, and then a bookshelf, and then another bouncer standing there. And the bouncer has someone come up to him, and this guy's whispering in his ear, and the bouncer like shakes him off, says no, and the guy walks away mad. And I'm like, this is weird. And then another guy walks up to him. The bouncer looks at him and goes, "Yep." And then he pulls the light down, and it slides the bookshelf open. And then there's a hallway, and I look through the hallway, and there's another part of the club with another party going on. And I'm like, oh my God. So it was a secret passage. It was really cool going to Mark Messier's speakeasy in Manhattan. A hole in the wall, literally. We thought we were going to die, and it ended up being a really, really fun night with some good people. So that's one of my
Oh,
favorite stories for Fraser.
New York. Can't go wrong with New York. That's as you
No.
know, a very awesome place. Hey, before I let you go, there's someone on YouTube, Blackhawks fan 20. He mentioned something here. I don't know if you know this, but he writes, "I don't know if you've heard this story before, but I'll tell you anyways. Mark Lewis, as you know, is a stadium announcer, and we've worked with him
Yep.
a lot. He says credited himself for scoring a goal in the NHL, and it says he has a score sheet where he announces the goals and penalties, and it was in the 80s, and Messi scored a goal, and he wrote his own name down on the score sheet. He turned on the microphone and made his announcement. Oilers goal, his 47th of a season, scored by number 11, Mark Lewis. Have you heard that before?
No, I'm kind of not surprised
Yeah,
because Mark's a character.
he is.
Mark's a character. I haven't seen him in a couple of years, probably since the closing of Rexall Place. But
Yep.
you know what's funny is you work so many game nights, and I'm sure maybe he did it deliberately, but maybe it was just a brain cramp. But that's actually pretty funny. I did not know about that, but I do remember the time he was in a McDonald's hockey card commercial. Him and the guy from the Montreal Forum, Maple Leaf Gardens, all the familiar and famous voices of the NHL in a time when you would hear them after goals on hockey broadcasts.
Right.
I remember him being a part of that. And I remember seeing him in person for the first time when I worked one of my first Oilers games as Gene Principe's studio runner. And I was like, oh, that's him. And got to know him a little bit over the years. Really nice guy. And that's hilarious that he did call himself over the PA for a goal. So congrats on the 47th of that season, Mark. Well done, buddy. Earned that one.
We'll have to look that up. We'll see if that is the legend that exists in former Rexall Place. I remember doing a really good portrait of him up on the catwalk in his speaker booth during farewell Rexall season. So I do miss his voice. It was one of those things that kind of that chapter had to close with Rexall and open up next with Rogers Place with a clean slate. But I do miss it's him and Rod Phillips are the voices of our childhood. So I definitely miss his voice. Cool.
Me too.
All right.
Me too,
well,
Nasher.
All right, Tommy. Well, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I'll turn you loose to check out that movie. Hopefully your selection does really well. And again, thanks for coming on for a show with me and supporting the show, and for coming on for my season finale.
Thank you very much, Nasher. Appreciate it.